There's only one more episode left to go. I'm a little nervous we might not get a season 2. Not gonna lie. But with that said, everybody, hello! Welcome back to our weekly Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited discussion video. Today we're here to talk about episode 10, the penultimate episode, Life Shouldn't Be Printed on Dollar Bills. But before we get into it, quick reminder, if you haven't done so, you gotta hit sub. I don't make the rules. If you're watching the video and you're not subbed, you gotta hit the sub button. Did you know 60% of the people who watch these videos aren't subbed? That's insane! Hit the sub button, for crying out loud. But yes, we're gonna jump into it despite the fact that 60% of you are breaking my heart. Anyway, hello, we're back. So this being the penultimate episode, they truly go back to where the series was strongest. I don't know how many of you guys remember, but the first 2 episodes were god tier. I thought Balance Unlimited in the first 2 episodes was insanely good. And episode 3 was very good. And then it kind of started to meander a bit. It definitely, I do think like the sudden sole focus on Shigemaru Kanbei, I actually think, like, looking back on it, I think it hurt the show. I really do think this show should have done more of a Sherlock thing, where there's, like, an underlying mystery, but it only shows up, like, heavy at the end of the season. I only say that because I feel like we could have had a tremendous amount of adventures by now with these two, where we get, like, the slow build of the Haru and Daisuke dynamic and really build up this kinship between them, or as I say, this relationship. But, you know, like, build that up a little bit more before this showdown with Daisuke's dad. You could have made Daisuke's dad more of, like, a Moriarty type instead of, like, this asshole who we're chasing after, who killed Cho and Take. Anyway, but yeah, so I just feel like that, like looking back, because I couldn't help myself. I went back and I rewatched episodes 1 and 2, and I watched, like, half of 3, and I was like, this is all good. Before I had to watch episode 10, and I was like, man, I can't help but feel like, man, it would have been cool to have this be more episodic, but what we got is still pretty damn good, especially this week's episode. All that to say, this episode goes back to that formula. It goes back to what made us want to start watching this in the first place, which is to say, if you're like me, you a bit of a Fudanshi/Fujoshi, so you kind of here for 2 dudes who might care about each other just a little too much, you know what I'm saying? So it's nice to have these 2 dudes be so, shall we say, chummy again. It's a very shippy episode. Like, the first note that I have here is just, it's a shockingly shippy episode, from the back to basics type of dynamic between them, where there's, like, constant banter throughout most of the episode, up until the end where we get a really nice line from Daisuke that kind of saves the day, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, the banter's back full force. There's Haru tending to Daisuke's wounds, which, like, y'all know me, bit of a sadist. So Haru, like, you know, tying up all the beaten injuries that Daisuke has, and Daisuke pushes him away because he doesn't want his help, but at the same time he needs to rely on Haru. It's too good. But also the fact that, like, when they're climbing through the air ducts, they have to get, like, basically right on top of each other. And, like, the one position of them, I'm probably showing it on screen, the one position where, like, Haru's, like, looking over Daisuke's shoulder, but the way it's framed, it looks, I'm gonna just grab this cup of water here because that looks interesting. I sense many a doujin in the future about what happens between Haru and Daisuke in the air ducts when the cameras weren't looking, is all I'm gonna say. Yeah, it's very much back to being shippy. Need I remind you, Haru, like, face plants right into Daisuke's ass at one point. Like, just straight up. But it's not just, like, the heavy, like, bait. It's also, like, little lines that are said here and there where the 2 of them are starting to show how they're just better together. Like, the 2 of them are fun characters on their own, but when you pair them together, they really evolve into something different. Which, if you saw my Makoharu versus Rinharu video, which, by the way, if you're a Makoharu shipper, that's fine. I'm not, but you know, everybody's allowed to have their ships. But in that video, I talk about how, for me, a ship has to have both characters be interesting on their own, but then make each other better when they're together. And with Haru and Daisuke, I really feel that way. Both characters are very fun on their own, but together they really just elevate each other into sort of overcoming their own problems, and they help each other grow, which to me is the sign of an excellent ship. And I really think that whether or not you ship Daisuke and Haru, whether or not you just see it as two partners, like in terms of two gay lovers, two partners, whatever you want to say. When I say partners, you know what I mean. I don't just mean police officers, partners in law. I mean, like, you know, no matter how you see it, I think their dynamic is great. They truly are two people who just need each other in general, whether you want to ship it or not. I ship it, but whether or not you ship it or not, it's just two people who desperately need each other, and you kind of love to see it. Throughout the episode as well, you start to see the two of them sort of come back to basics throughout it. Like, you see Haru start to sort of regain some of the confidence he had back in episodes 1 and 2, before, you know, his resolve was shaken and he's reminded of his past trauma. But you see Haru sort of, like, come back to the hero cop that he always wanted to be, you know? You see that at play here when he's, like, acting as a decoy and showing up to save Daisuke. It's him back being the good guy again and full of confidence, and you love to see it. Daisuke also has his comms again. Like, Daisuke also has, like, his tech back. Although this time it's not Hyusuke, it's actually Suzue. But I like Suzue better than Hyusuke anyway, so I'm okay with that. Because Hyusuke is a bad boy. He's a bad AI. Well, I mean, he's a really good AI, but he's on the side of the devils in this one. But it's nice to see the pair of them sort of, like, build back up to what we know them to be. You know, like, Daisuke got his ass kicked by Evil Victor. Haru couldn't quite shoot Evil Victor, even though he probably should have. And you slowly throughout the episode see the two of them piece themselves back together, leading all the way up to the big fight with Evil Victor, as Daisuke basically tries to turn off the adolium. Is that the name of the weird, like, energy thing? Adolium. He has to go turn off the adolium reactor that's screwing with their tech. So he gets there, and as soon as he gets there, Evil Victor's there waiting for him. And Haru's not too far off, right? Like, Haru basically tricked Evil Victor into thinking that he died, which was actually really clever. Like Haru throwing his jacket as he climbed up to the top, so it looks like he fell in the ocean and died. So that was really clever. But yeah, Haru shows up, and Haru trains the gun on the reactor, right? Like, Daisuke says, like, it's the red valve, shoot the red valve, and it'll turn off the thing, and then we can take this guy down. But Haru's still shaking, right? He looks at the gun in his hand, and he knows he can't hit this particular valve from where he is. He's like, I can't, like, it's too far. And not only is it too far, he's shaking too much. Like, it'd be different if he had a steady hand, but he doesn't. Like, we know that Haru has a tremendous amount of PTSD from holding his weapon, right? So he's like, I can't. And Daisuke says to him, like, you're so ridiculous. All this time being a civil servant, you didn't even know you've always been a hero. And I was like, right? Because I was like, oh my god. That's what I wanted to hear all season. That's what I wanted Daisuke to say to him all season. And as soon as he says that, Haru's like, oh. Like, and his hands totally go steady, shoots the valve, bam. And with Haru, like, coming full circle, like, growing to the point of where he's overcome, maybe not overcome, but learned to get a grip on his PTSD. In that moment, Daisuke's, because the adolium reactor's gone, Daisuke gets his friggin' crazy Metal Gear suit back, right? And he kicks Evil Victor's ass, so Daisuke, in this moment of humility, gets his weapon back. So the two of them basically needed to build themselves back up throughout this entire season, leading up to this moment where together they build each other back up. Like, Daisuke helps Haru, Haru helps Daisuke, and they actually propel each other back into the positions of strength that they were in without any of the baggage they previously had. Daisuke's not as much of a dick. Haru's not as nervous about being a cop anymore. They're both back to their similar strength without any of the baggage that weighed them down. And I think the coolest part to me was how even Hoshino can see, and Hoshino still sucks, but even Hoshino can see that this, like, disgraced detective and this spoiled billionaire have grown beyond being just detectives. They are actually heroes now. And they even show you the flashback of the two of them watching the detective movie where the detective talks about, like, how they should be heroes for justice, right? And the two of them are watching it together. And you see that moment resonated with both of them. Otherwise, why would the scene show up, right? So you see that moment, that discussion of being heroes, like, it stuck. And even Hoshino, when he watches them get in the helicopter to try to go after Shigemaru, it's a moment where even Hoshino, a guy who's been nothing but rude to them this whole time, acknowledges that they've gone beyond, plus ultra. You know, they've become heroes, and you just love to see it. I think the only real piece of criticism that I have in regards to this particular episode, it's not even really criticism, it's just because at first I was like, oh, I didn't like that, but by the end I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense. I really wanted them to catch Shigemaru this week, because I was like, well, that's a bit of an anticlimax that he gets away on that friggin' hover bike, because again, Metal Gear. But given where we end the episode with, like, the setup for the final showdown with Shigemaru, it makes sense. Like, I was kind of hoping that we would wrap everything up this week, and then next week would be sort of an epilogue, where we get to check in with everybody, but I think next week is basically just going to be catching Shigemaru Kanbei. So, yeah, I was a little bit I was like, oh, I would have liked to have seen, like, the main plot wrap up, and then we get an epilogue for the final episode. But I'm not against a big bombastic showdown with Shigemaru either. I'm here for it, especially with both characters going in full hero mode. Like, when they walk towards the helicopter, they couldn't look more like heroes. But yeah, Shigemaru in general, as a villain, I wish we knew a bit more about him. I assume we will next week. But as a villain, what we've seen so far, he's a real cold bastard, right? He's killed Cho and Take. He actively wants Evil Victor to teach Daisuke a lesson, even paying him a large sum to do so. And even after it looks like he's caught, he actively tells Hyusuke, like, neutralize Daisuke. And Hyusuke fires, like, that adolium energy thing right at Daisuke. And he hits him twice. He hits him in the back and in the leg. And Daisuke actually takes a hell of a beating this week. Like, even when he's talking to Haru, like, when they're fighting Evil Victor, like, the dude's shooting that energy thing off. And it, like, burns Daisuke's leg. And it burns his hand. And, like, Daisuke takes a hell of a beating this week. And again, I kind of love to see Daisuke taking a hell of a beating, and I don't mean that because I don't like Daisuke. I mean that because, you know, it's vaguely hot. And I don't just mean hot to touch. But it's, yeah, like Daisuke takes a hell of a beating this week, but also just the idea that Shigemaru won't accept defeat and actively tries to kill his own son with Hyusuke in front of Haru, just to prove, like, just to get away, you know, just to live to scheme another day. Like, he's a real cold, calculated dude. But again, I just wish we knew more about this guy. I have a feeling we will. Again, like I said, I'm pretty sure the final episode of what I hope is just season 1. I don't know if we'll get a season 2. That kind of remains to be seen. But I assume the final episode will be, like, a bit of an explanation of why Shigemaru has done the things he's done. I'm looking forward to the finale, but I'm also kind of like, I'm curious what they're going to do and if they are going to set up a season 2. I don't know. I hope there's a season 2 because I feel like there's so much potential with Balance Unlimited. I just felt like the middle of the show kind of went astray a bit. But overall, like, I really loved the beginning of the series. I have been loving these last few episodes. Just give me a solid conclusion and I'll be happy. But with that said, everybody, that is going to wrap up all of my thoughts on this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, then don't forget to boop that up snoot and share if you care. And of course, as always, I have to give a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people. Look at all of these beautiful names. And hey, if you would like to join these beautiful people, there are now 2 ways to do so. The first is by hitting that first link in the description to check out our Patreon page. And the second, for just a little bit more, is by hitting that join button and joining us as a member of the channel. You get a nifty badge next to your name, some emotes that you can use in the comments and the premiere chats, and of course your name at the end of these videos. Hitting the join button's probably, in my opinion, the best way because you get a lot more bang for your buck, but that's just me. If that sounds cool to you, go ahead and consider hitting that join button. It'd be super appreciated. So once again, a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. But with that said, everybody, that's pretty much it for me. So until next time, you stay classy, AnyTube. And wash your dang hands. And maybe have a glass of water too. Hydrate. It's important. Okay, see ya.